是2025年9月20号，今天来看 China Economy 的最后一章啊，就是这个 title 在这儿了 How should the United States respond to the rise of China？ 就说这个中国政治跟经济力量崛起之后呢，这个作者认为的 United States 应该怎么 react， 还是蛮有意思的。那在之前的就是这一大章的之前的一些地方，这个作者提到的比较有意思的一个问题就是说，其实也是 point out 这个中国崛起其实是占了天时地利人和，一方面政治环境，国内的政治环境比较稳定，所以说可以 attract 到很多的 investment。那另一方面呢，国际上又在 globalization， 所以把自己 incorporate 到了这个 WTO 的体系中呢，也算是赚得盆满钵满了。这样的机会其实是很少的，而之后会怎么样发展，其实是很难讲的。就是说，大家就是像我们这一代人处于这个改革开放的那么几十年，真正的 benefit 了中国经济的腾飞，但那个在历史上可能才是真正少见的那么一个时间窗口，而大部分的时间可能就真的是所谓的历史的垃圾时间。扯远了，我们今天继续来看吧。The challenge that generates the most comment by far is the challenge that China supposedly poses to the global order and to its central power, the United States. Realistic diplomatic historians argue that the transition from one great power to another has never gone smoothly, and that the United States and China are doomed to face off in a great political or military confrontation sooner or later. Media pundits trumpet every new action by China as yet another sign of inexorable march of power from west to east. Apparatchiks of the gigantic American military industry complex are quick to claim that every quiver of the Chinese state betrays an existential threat justifying a large increase in their budget. A recent global public opinion survey shows that majorities in most countries believe that China will replace or has already replaced the United States as the world's leading power. 这个军备的这方面有点意思啊。其实，美国其实有那么一部分人特别喜欢吹嘘中国的这个tech 或者说是 military power， 这样其实目的呢更多的是为他们自己的 benefit 搞到更多的 budget 啊。As our discussion so far has shown, this perception is at odds with reality. China's rise is a large fact and raises a host of strategic questions that must be taken seriously. Yet much of the anxiety about China's capacity to challenge the United States for global leadership or to disrupt the US-led global system is misplaced or overdone. We can separate our discussion of these issues into two parts, one on facts and one on values. On the facts, remember that description we gave of the global system at the beginning of this chapter. This system is complex, multi-layered, and robust, and has already survived severe tests. It depends not just on the economic size and technological capacities of the United States, but on a sophisticated array of multilateral institutions, knowledge and financial networks, and military alliances. It has been built up over 7 decades since the end of World War II upon deep foundations laid over the previous century through the emergence of modern industrial capitalism in Europe and the United States, the creation of flexible and responsive liberal political systems, and the statecraft of running a global commercial empire, which Great Britain pioneered and the United States has inherited and improved. The breadth, depth, and strength of this global system renders one-on-one comparisons between China and the United States irrelevant. China's economy may at some point be bigger than that of the United States, but so what? Its economic growth will still depend to a substantial degree on its ability to integrate with the global system. As its weight grows, China will gain a greater voice in how that system is run, as it should, but its ability to transform the deeply rooted principles on which that system rests will be modest. China's capacity to conjure up some alternative competing system should not be overrated. What would be the basis for such a system? It cannot be technological leadership, since China is a technological laggard. It cannot be a military alliance structure, since China has no alliances and no credible prospects of creating any. It cannot be a regional power bloc, since all of its neighbors view China as a degree of mistrust and are busy with hedging and balancing strategies to constrain China's influence. It could perhaps be a claim that China has discovered more effective methods of governance and economic management, and hence a stronger claim to global legitimacy and moral leadership. Here, we must turn to the value side of the equation. Perhaps the deepest anxiety caused by China's rise stems from the supposed paradox of its dynamic economy and its authoritarian political system. For years, critics have claimed this combination was unsustainable and that eventually China would be forced to accept the true face of liberal democracy. For years, this critic has proved wrong. The worry, especially in the United States, whose elites subscribe to a monothetic will of the unique rightness of American system and the essential imperfection of all other systems, is that China has shown how to combine economic growth with repressive politics. The risk, therefore, is that more countries will be seduced into this path and away from the combination of free market capitalism and electoral democracy favored by the United States and its allies. It is true that China's governance system is founded on principles quite different to those of Western democracies. In particular, the party rejects elections as a criterion of political legitimacy in favor of effective governance. This stance achieves broad acquiescence in Chinese society because it is little more than a restatement of the principle of Tianming, or the mandate of heaven, which was the basis of legitimacy in China's imperial system. For 1500 years, China's bureaucracy and ruling house justified their rule by claiming to run a well-ordered land where roads, canals, irrigation systems, and dikes were maintained. Commercial activities were vibrant and well-regulated, and social stability was maintained. Breakdowns in this order signaled the loss of the right to rule. The Communist Party makes essentially the same claim, but in the context of a high-growth industrial economy rather than a low-growth agriculture one. 这点很有意思啊，就是他还是认为中国的这个共产党的这个政治统治，其实跟皇权没有太大的区别。那更好的一点就是说，他这个在统治者内部可能是能形成一定的所谓的民主的，但实际上这个被习近平破坏了。The pragmatic response from the United States and other liberal democracies should begin with the recognition that China's system of values differs substantially from that of the West. that this system of values is not some fragile recent invention, but is deeply rooted in Chinese traditions of governance, and that it is valid for most Chinese people by the nation's developmental success since 1980s. China's governance system has many flaws, but has generally proved effective and has in fact changed substantially in response to shifting conditions, even if the Communist Party's monopoly remains intact. Most important, outsiders can do nothing to change it. Just outsiders can do nothing to change the aspects of the American system they deplore, such as the capture of the political system by big campaign donors, institutionalized racism, excessive consumption of energy and other resources, capital punishment, and so on. When the majority of Chinese people feel the system no longer meets their needs, they may seek to change it. As people across the world has changed their governance systems over the past 2 centuries. Second, greater participation by Chinese companies and the Chinese government in the world outside China is a good thing, and there is no reason why all this participation must occur within the pre-existing frameworks of the US-led system. The world is a large place with diverse needs, and different sources of funding and ideas should be encouraged, not rebuffed. Only after much more of this sort of international engagement will we be able to see which elements of the Chinese models are exportable and which are applicable only in the special conditions of China. My personal suspicion is that a few will prove exportable. Moreover, the more Chinese companies and agencies work abroad, the more they will absorb international norms and practices, and the gulf between Chinese and Western values that now seems so scary will lessen. It is also possible that Westerners, once they discard their ideological blinkers, will find aspects of the Chinese way of doing things that are genuinely worth emulating and adapting. Last, it should be recognized that China will never be content to be a US vassal, and that this is entirely reasonable. Equally, however, the deep uncertainty over its long-run demographic and economic outlook, and the untapped expansive potential of the US company, not to mention the richness and robustness of the US world order, make it unlikely that China will ever unseat the United States as the world's technological, cultural, and political leader. Given China's demonstrated pragmatism and caution under successive leaders over the past 35 years, there is reason to believe that an accommodation can be reached under which China enjoys increased prestige and influence to the extent it can earn it, but the US-led system remains the core of the world's political and economic arrangements. 21st century China is not the reincarnation of Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany or Soviet Union, recognizing the fact that the duality of its distinct value system does not constitute appeasement and containment, the strategy that ultimately proved successful against the brittle and stagnant Soviet system is a foolish idea when applied to China, which has proved itself dynamic and adaptable. There is plenty of room in the world for both the US and the Chinese system, so long as people on both sides can agree that this peaceful coexistence is a goal worth striving for. 这个作者还是希望世界和平的。实际上会不会这样？我们再看看他2020年的版本是怎么说的。好啦，今天就读到这儿了，大家拜拜。